Andy, one of the guys at my local club, was having a bit of a clear out. At the next flying session, he brought it down to the field for me. Knowing my propensity for tinkering with stuff, said, "I wonder if there's anything you can do with this. I've got no further use for it." Of course, I'm up for the challenge. Now, I've reviewed several similar models to this with the twin pusher arrangement. I'll link to some of those up there. They're a lot of fun and an ideal introduction to the hobby for youngsters of any age. However, they are somewhat limited by the fact that they can only be controlled by differential thrust from the propellers, and there are no actual moving control surfaces. After a few outings, then the thing goes into the shed, never to be seen again. I wonder if we can pep it up a bit. Inspired by my success with the Lidl's glider conversion, I thought, why not another little EDF project? Now, the Lidl conversion used the 40mm EDF unit from Hobby King. Now, I've been looking around and I found this little guy, a more or less 30mm fan driven by a brushless motor again, and it doesn't look too out of place somewhere on here. That then perhaps powered by one of these 450 milliampere hour 3-cell graphene packs. We may be able to fit that in there. Will the project fly? Let's hack it together and see. Just before we start hacking things around, one of the things I like to check is, with the original battery in place, where is the CFG? And I've marked the spots here on the wing. Placing my fingers on those spots, we have level flight. That will give us a guide to where the CFG ought to be when we figure out where we're going to put the motor and battery, being the heaviest items. Clearly, the first thing that we're going to need to do is to remove the little DC motors and whatever guts lie within here. It appears that this is held into place with screws, as indeed is the back. That will be the next thing that I'm going to do then, is to remove those pieces and see what lies beneath. Once that is done, we can then think about where the best place to put the motor is going to be, and then figure out where to put the battery to get the balance in the correct place. With the screws removed, things get quite interesting. There's the little receiver board, has another connector on there. I think I've seen maybe options to use LED strips on the wings attached to there. Now, this is good news, because normally these things are glued in place by the glue that only the Chinese seem to have and keep for themselves, which is virtually impossible to remove without destroying everything. But this is very neat, just screwed together. When we remove the top section, we see that the wing actually comes completely away. It is actually in two sections, just taped together. Similarly, with the back part here, with that removed, we can then remove the whole tail section. I'm not sure if there are any spares available for this thing, but it's interesting to know that that is how it's put together. This bay here, my idea is to use this, which is a FrSky XM Plus S-Bus receiver, which is connected to an S-Bus to PWM conversion board. As always, links to everything that I use down in the description there. On my homebrew thrust test rig then, link up there to how I made that. I'm going to be testing the little EDF, and this looks like a suitable size battery, probably about the biggest one I'd be able to get in the plane, 450 milliampere. It's allegedly a graphene 85C pack. We shall see. My trusty servo tester, and although it's a little motor, safety squints at the ready. I have read on Tinterweb that some people have found the rear housing of the motor has come apart, and we don't want that getting anywhere near us if it happens. Let's see what type of thrust and current draw we'll be getting. I do have my watt meter in circuit as well. I'll play it back on the camera, but I think I saw there about 200 grams thrust. Obviously it's only a static test, and the wattmeter shows 10.3 amps, 122.6 watts. That gives us a guidance for the thrust at least. We'll know with the weight of the aircraft what sort of thrust to weight ratio we're going to be looking at. With the motors and the original receiver stripped out, then our weight for the airframe is 65 grams. I've 3D printed this little support for the motor. Let's put the motor on there. And our battery is the next heaviest thing. Our receiver and converter. Going to be using elevon control, therefore one servo per wing, which brings us to a total of just under 150 grams. Some of these wires are overly long, and we're going to need to add the elevon control surfaces and other bits and pieces. We will probably end up somewhere around 155 maybe grams, perhaps less. We'll have to wait and see, but at least we know that with our static thrust figure of around 200 grams, then we have a better than 1-to-1 thrust to weight ratio. It's looking to be around about 1.3. In theory then, the thing should fly. And here she is. My first idea was to mount the motor on the top there, but as with my first attempt with the Lidl's conversion, the amount of pitching down was going to make it completely uncontrollable if it ever actually got off the ground. My solution then, simply to sling it underneath. I'm a little bit concerned that if it actually gets to the point of rotating, that might drag on the ground. We'll have to wait and see. Carved out the space in the front there for the battery. That's just a press fit at the moment. I think I'll put some Velcro on there, belt and braces. You can see my little XM Plus receiver there on the top with the PWM converter underneath it, and under the back here is my speed controller. The other thing that I've done then clearly is to cut out some elevons and just put a little servo in the wing there. I've cut out as much as I dared. I could have perhaps used an even smaller servo, but then I'd have to mess around with changing the cable connectors, as the ones that I have which are smaller than this are JST type connectors. There we have it then. In the next few days I'm hopeful that the weather will be kind enough that I can see if I can get it in the air, and we'll see how long she remains there. Thanks for watching.